Hi, and welcome again to Language Arts Chats with Mrs. Olson. Get your tea or your coffee. It's morning, so coffee. I'll wait. Okay, you're back. So I wanted to do another installment of some IEW training. And as you may have remembered, some of you from last year, the training videos that Andrew Pudawa puts out are exceptional. And we're hoping to use them, but for the sake of streamlining things and making our time efficient, your time efficient, and just to keep things moving along, I'm doing some summary videos. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. The Pudawa videos very specifically train in IEW, which is your students' language arts book, and what we use for our basis for the writing curriculum. I'm going to talk a little bit about some theory things that I went through an 8-hour training course that Andrew Pudawa, like a weekend conference thing that he had online. It's free, and I'm going to send you the link. I actually watched it most of it on 2-speed, and I'll highlight certain sections that I felt like were really valuable. But if you're new to this and you can watch it in installments, I think it casts the vision so beautifully for so much of what we're doing here. At Hybrid, we have some classical elements, but we are not a classical homeschool co-op. So I will reference some of those kinds of things. But if you don't know what those are, that will help you know, or you can just grab me aside and ask, if there's parts. This also would be a great time, if you didn't already, grab your IEW book and maybe something to take notes with. That will be helpful. So I'm going to talk about some theoretical things, and then on the other side of it, some very practical what's coming down the pike with your students' writing program in language arts. And hopefully that will set you guys up for a great finish to this first part of the year leading into Christmas. So I'm waiting for you to get your materials collected. Great, welcome back. All right, so the first thing I wanted to just talk a little bit about, and I'm extrapolating this and summarizing very, very much from the first section of Andrew Pudawa's training video. He said this beautiful thing that he talks about having realized, that you can't get out of a brain that isn't already in there to begin with, something that's not there to begin with. So I cannot, you could not extract from me, no matter how hard you sucked out of my brain, coding for a video game. You couldn't. It would be impossible. It's just not in there. And so in any realm of life, you can only draw out of someone the things that have already been put in. And I think perhaps with the exception of spiritual matters and godly wisdom, because wisdom comes from God. And so I think in that way, it reminds us that our spiritual lives have a different source than, but they overlay so beautifully. So as it relates to language arts, you as the teacher, and us as the instructors in all subjects, but I'm going to continue just when I say here forward, I'm going to be talking about language arts and the memory work, because those are the two realms that they overlay. Well, the memory work overlays with everything, but then the language arts for the middle schoolers is sort of the niche we're talking about, obviously. So the primary goal for you, and eventually then for your students, is to get reliably correct and appropriately sophisticated English language out of them when they write, when they speak, and when they converse. And right, we're raising adults. We're not actually raising children, we're raising adults. And so we're looking to impart into them reliably correct and appropriately sophisticated English language. So what are the main influences that, what are we imparting into them? Well, what is their main source of input for the English language? 20 years ago and more, there were several studies out, perhaps you remember this, that said children spend upwards of 5 hours a day on television. Well, it's increased because of the different types of media available. So if you include all types of media, I'm sure it's more than the average student, 5 hours a day. And so they're just forget about what they're actually seeing, but just the English language that's coming into their ears. Is this reliably correct, linguistically, grammatically, and appropriately sophisticated? I'm going to go with no. If you flip on the TV, any channel, sports, maybe the History Channel, you could get some exceptions. Or like a niche channel, you might get some new vocabulary. But overall, if you just flipped on the TV, especially the ads, closed your eyes and just listened to the vocabulary and the syntax, it is extremely simplified. And this is not appropriately sophisticated for our middle schoolers. So we can't rely on media to give them reliably correct, appropriately sophisticated English language. What's the second place that they, in middle school, would get the input? It would be their friends. Now, there are two things that are definitely not cool as it relates to language when you are in middle school, or pretty much any time. One would be the friend who would think, oh, I think I will help all of my friends speak more eloquently, so I will use verbose diction throughout the day. That would be awkward. And it would also be awkward if the student thought, wow, my friends really have a wide and studied vocabulary. I should go home and elevate my knowledge so that I can speak with them on par. Also, no. What happens is, with a group of peers, the language reduces until the most common level. Pudawa uses the example of putting a bunch of 9-year-olds in a room together. And he said, if it's just boys, you may end up with just sounds. The draw to relate to one another trumps the need for sophisticated language, and you are reduced to interacting on the lowest common denominator. So putting a classroom together of 20 or 30 8-year-olds is actually really contrary to getting reliably correct and appropriately sophisticated English language. The next tier where they get this language would be parents, but in my home, most of the language that I use with my children is like, get your shoes on, not very eloquent or appropriately sophisticated, or where are my keys? And rarely is it the kind of beautiful conversation that I want them to absorb. And then finally is books. And so we value, and I've been assigning reading, but books out loud, read together, audiobooks are hugely valuable. And this is a reliable way to get appropriately sophisticated English language. The book choices are really important. And so that's why we created a list. But I would say the more that you can share that together, the better. So I wanted to go through all that as an introduction into saying, just as a kind of circling back, we're not going to get out of the students what's not put in. And so how do we put it in? We look for ways, we find places where it meets them with things they love, or we just value it and create an environment where language and literature are valued. And I would caution those of you who have readers who love reading, especially if they read fast, it doesn't necessarily mean they're absorbing the language, because a lot of times fast readers, those who really love the story, will just skip over the language because they don't need every single word to get the point of the story. And so, again, I strongly encourage reading aloud, audiobooks. There's some ways to take in that language. We'll try to do some during class, but our time is limited. And so, so I wanted to really champion that and just say that the more ways that you can find joyful ways to immerse your students in what we're already the thrust of what's already going on at hybrid, the ways that you can take the historical chapters in their history books that they're enjoying and draw them further in, And the more that you're able to do that, read whole books. Excerpts and short stories are wonderful, but whole books draw family in and together like nothing else. And read books that you love, because if you're not into it, it will be a tragic, horrific drudgery, and you will avoid it. So, and then if you have multiple children and you can do it together as a family, read at the oldest child's level. The younger ones will come along, and their language will become more sophisticated because of it. So those are, as a very short summary of one of the sessions that I just thought was so valuable, and speaks to kind of a wide variety. The audiobooks are phenomenal. And if you need some recommendations, I will put some links for how to find some audiobooks that are great, well narrated, that kind of thing. And you'll start to find narrators you love too. He also spoke a great deal about the value of memory work. And I'll share this little excerpt. Historically, around the 1920s, there was a great movement to remove God from schools, as many of you know. And it left a void. And John Dewey was one of the really big promoters, Dewey Decimal System creator, but he did a lot more than that to the detriment of our school system. His opinion of memory work was that at best it was a waste of time, and at worst it stifled creativity. And in fact, when they took God out of the school system, there was a void left, and so creativity became the new God. And it was all about innovation and make your own thing. Well, what did we just say? You can't pull out of a brain what hasn't been put in. And so eventually that sort of broke down. There was nothing really that good coming out of it. And so the basic skills of the students began to decline. What you might have read in an average high school graduate's letter home in in the Civil War, is suddenly very difficult to read by the average high school graduate in the 70s or 80s. And so they reorganized it, and the new God became standards. Oh, let's have a standard. Well, when many people don't hit the standard, they lower the standard, and we're not hitting that, so we lower it again, and all of a sudden it's very low. Oh, we need to raise the standards, and this went through several cycles. You may have heard of No Child Left Behind. That was one of the iterations of making these standards. This isn't working. And so the new God that's replaced it is technology. Oh, surely if we put technology in the hands of our children, it will most certainly, I'm shaking, aren't I? I'll try not to. We will most certainly get the best out of them. And so you can see without God, there is a void left. And in its right place, the foundational basic skills of anything start with imitation. You babble at your baby. Ma, 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 ma. And then of course they say their first word is ball or dada or whatever. But whether it's in dance or basketball or swimming or music, whatever the realm is, we use imitation and copywork and memorization as the basis. And why wouldn't we do it here? And so that's in academics. And so that's one of the reasons that we use and value the memory work. And why it seems so countercultural is because it was thrown out 100 years ago. It was baby bathwater and all. So this is true in painting, architecture, and it goes on, the list goes on and on. So with that in mind, it's one of the reasons that I personally feel, and the instructors, Laura, that we've put a lot of emphasis on the Claritas memory work. The flip books should be coming. I had to delay another week for some printing issues, but the little flip books are a small version of your large Claritas book, so that you can have them handy, do them in the car. Maybe as an adult, maybe there's a subject you're really interested in. See if you can go through the body of memory work. I like to memorize the whole of the history and science work. Those are the challenges for me year to year, because I have memorized and review periodically the timeline, the math, and the English. So it's new to me. I didn't do this growing up. I grew up in public school and skated through because I participated with good grades, but learning very little other than how to talk on the fly. All right, so now I want to transition and talk about some practicalities. By the way, if you want to listen to this on 1.5 speed, you can, that's fine, or faster, right? The Bible says be quick to listen, so if you want to speed it up, I'm not offended. All right, so our students are across 3 grades are usually at 3 different points. And if you have multiple students in middle school, you can see that there's just a different pace within the grade, and there's some different assignments coming along. I have, as of today, November 2nd, I have assigned some different, between now and Christmas, some different memorization between the classes, and we're gonna do some fun things with that. So you'll see that coming along. I wanna speak specifically to the IEW. The students are in Unit 3, which is lessons 5, 6, and 7. I'm on page 8. So if you could please open to page 8 and 9. It's a full spread that has the scope and sequence of the year. And this is a valuable page because it kind of shows where we are and where we're going. Unit 3, lessons 5 through 8, are all about retelling narrative stories. So we have done in the first unit, it was simply note making and outlines. That was just lesson 1. Lessons 2, 3, and 4 in unit 2 were writing from notes. So making the notes and then creating a retelling of the actual events. Now we've taken it a step further, and they're taking it, reorganizing the information, and then writing it in a specific format. So if you are looking at, let's just go straight to lesson 8, which will be on page, I have this marked. I did have it marked. So we're flipping open to the checklist for lesson 8, which is on page 79, and the keyword outline for it, which is on page 76. So the students will read the source text. They will underline the points that have the different story mapping elements. The first paragraph, in the keyword outline, so in the first group, they are going to put in the information about the setting and characters that are introduced, okay? It's spread throughout the whole source text. So they have to read the whole text and then group it together for the setting and characters. The second paragraph is restating in their own words, with their own style, describing the goal, conflict, or problem. There are prompt questions, and as I worked with the students, I've said, you do not have to answer all of these questions. You do not have to answer these questions in that order. These questions that are down the side of page 76 for the conflict problem paragraph would say, what does the main character want or need? What do the main characters do, say, think, and feel? What happens before the climax? Those questions are prompts. It's to extract from them, from their memory and imagination, the experience going on in the story. So that's paragraph 2, and they're doing the keyword outline process. 3 words, numbers are free, simple and minimal symbols, and they're doing really well with that. And then they should do paragraph 3 outline of their own words, and this is where the climax happens, where they're, I always tell them that at the end of paragraph 2, I should feel like I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to find out what happens. And then paragraph 3, the moment happens, and then the resolution. And so after they've gone through this process, they should be able to, that's the keyword outline, read, look up, speak. They should be able to look at their own keyword outline from page 76. It was Massachusetts in 1775, and tensions were running high. Okay, and then be able to go down through and tell the story in complete sentences in their own words. This checks to see that they have adequately taken notes from their memory, from the source text, and from their creativity. They should be able to retell it. Then, when they're able to do that, they may need to go back and review the source text. They may need to adjust their keyword outline. But when they can retell it, they're ready to move on to writing the rough draft. Okay? So we have read the text, keyword outline, read, look up, speak. Do that a couple times if you need to. And then create the rough draft. At that point, they have, in this case, a 3-paragraph story that's retelling the one that they read. And in this case, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs. They're reorganizing it into 3 with some speech if they want to. Could create another one. And then they're having peer edits, parent edits, however you want to engage with that. They are reading the whole text aloud to themselves, typing it. Maybe they're having a polished draft printed out and make sure checking themselves against their final checklist. So on page 79, again, this is for lesson 8, they're expected to have an ly adverb in every paragraph, a who-which clause in each paragraph, a strong verb, which we're discussing in our grammar part of our lessons, and a because clause. By lesson 8, we'll have introduced that as well. If your student is not easily doing the ly adverb and the who-which clause, which I think everybody is already doing those, then if as we add more elements, dress up or stylistic techniques, it becomes very cumbersome if we keep moving forward and they're not there yet. And so I want you to have the freedom, I want you to know you have the freedom as the head coach, teacher, to take a Sharpie and your student's checklist, and I'm actually going to do this, and you can take, you know what, I'm going to have them do that strong verb, but I'm absolutely not requiring 3. I'm only going to require 1 because clause, and I'm going to give it 3 points here. And you can rewrite and create your own value on this checklist page. You can choose for your student what is valuable. If they have mastered each of those tasks, and they are going along at a good clip, then leave them in and encourage them to add vocabulary. You can award extra points for vocabulary. But when they have finished, the point is when they have finished a final draft, they submit it to you, their teacher, and you grade it. And if you can add feedback, many of you do. And it's beautiful to see you giving that interaction, like, way to go, I'm so proud of you. You can award points for things like vocabulary. If they've really been working on, typing it themselves, you can award an extra point if you want to, because they typed it themselves. They've been working on their keyboarding and you did it. You can type it for them. For many years, I've had some of my own children who needed me to secretary for them. So those are just some different ways to make this work for you. Remember, you are teaching your student. You are not teaching the curriculum. You're teaching your student. And so if you want them to do something really different, if they have a really artistic flair, and you want to manipulate the assignment in some really creative way that's wonderful for your family, please take that freedom. Just drop me an email. Mrs. Olson, little Joey is going to do his rough draft, and then we are going to make toy guns out of paper mache, and that's how he's going to do the shot heard around the world. And we're going to ride our stick ponies around the neighborhood. I don't know. I would love to hear about it, but that is your discretion as a homeschooler. You are tracking the grades. I am keeping the QuickBooks just so you have that visual feedback of like they're coming in on time. Your students are actually turning into me what you've looked at. But for many of you who have previously had your students in the classroom, homeschool is just different. and especially in, up through 7th and 8th grade, there can be it can matter potentially if you end up homeschooling in high school, but generally the grades just don't matter. The grades were created because God was taken out of it, and they needed a way to measure for a big class what was going into their brains. But you know what's going into their brains, because you can see what's coming out of them. You can see the memory work. You can hear them using the new vocabulary words. Like it just different when it's a relationship versus a huge class. The testing and the checking in that way was created for efficiency for a teacher of a large class. You're one-on-one, or 2, or sometimes 3 or 4. Still a very small class. Okay. I'm flipping back to page 8 and 9. Okay. So the shot heard around the world, page 79, which is all part of Unit 3, retelling narrative stories. That follows the same process that we've been doing, where once you have graded it, I have a due date where it's due back to me, that students turn it in, and I basically just comment, wow, I love your vocabulary. Oh my goodness, your format is correct now. Way to use 12-point font instead of 8-point font, or whatever. I try to be I'm getting to know their writing well, so I sometimes can notice what has shifted from previous papers or last year or whatever, and I can easily see some of the progression. But I'm reading 29 papers almost every week. So it is, again, really up to you to know your student intimately. I'm the special teams coach. You are the teacher, head coach. The next unit that we're going to move into is Unit 5. And that will be, I'm really hoping we get to everybody, even the 5th graders, onto that. Unit 4, which will be summarizing a reference. Summarizing a reference is going to look and feel a whole lot like the writing from notes. In the earlier units, they had a one-to-one correspondence. They looked at the sentence and they rewrote the key words in the keyword outline from that sentence to this, and then when they said it, they just retold it in their own words. Now, when they get into this next section, which are lessons 9, 10, 11, and 12, they are going to be looking at a much longer source text and choosing the things that they find most interesting, important, and relevant. And they are going to be creating a summary. And I write it like this for the students, and I write it like this for the parents, because and I tell the students, you are not creating an allery. You're not trying to retell everything that is in this essay. This is an enormously fabulous building block for their future essays, future this year and future life skills, to be able to look at a whole text and choose, well, I'm not going to be able to do an exhaustive report on this. I'm going to choose part of it. So I'm going to choose what's interesting, important, and relevant. We'll chant this, we'll say it, but I want you to know that. And so if you flip to, we'll do just a little bit more here. If you flip to lesson 9, and we're going to look at the source text for the Benjamin Franklin one. This is page 84. The source text, when I'm not going to read it or anything, but you'll notice that it is very long. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Olson, I have to read and write out all of that. Yes, you have to read all of it. But then you are going to do the students are going to do a summary. And they have a required number of key topics that they have to find. We're going to talk about the topic clincher rule, The topic, I often liken it to a hamburger, but the topic sentence and the clincher sentence are like the buns on a burger, or the lettuces if you're gluten-free, or the, I don't know, whatever. And that everything in the middle, the key facts, are all the things that you like to put on your sandwich. Your choice. It'd be like if you had a burger buffet, you get the bun, and then you choose what facts to put on it. But the top and bottom, organize it so that you know it's all in one sandwich. And so that becomes very important. We will talk about that at length in class. You can read about this. Most of this is described in your manual. And we will spend several lessons on that, adding different dress ups and require, the level of just practice, stylistic and dress up techniques will increase. Then hopefully before the new year, although this is a little ambitious, we will get to one of the sections that the students generally love, which is writing from pictures. And in this case, we are flipping back so we're kind of alternating between giving them the source and then having them reorganize it versus drawing out of them what they have in their mind from information and memory. And so in the next unit, writing from pictures, which are lessons 13, 14, and 15. We'll probably do 1 or 2 now and save 1 or 2 for the spring. But the students are simply given a couple of pictures like that. And from those pictures and the background information, they get to create a story or a 3-paragraph narrative. This is usually very fun for them at this point in the year. And so we'll be doing that, hopefully get to start in December and into January. The dress ups, the requirements remain. So the structure, we're giving them, like when they made the houses at the beginning of the year, we're giving them the structure, but then how they furnish that structure is up to them. That's the style. And so thank you so much for your time and for journeying with me. I hope that you have a little bit of inspiration about the purposes of helping your children find ways to take in reliably correct and appropriately sophisticated English language. Sharing books together is such a beautiful way to do it, even audiobooks if you have car rides. The value of memory work, imitating great things, and allowing that to be what's in their minds and in the academic realm, just as they would in any other realm where they wanted to improve their skills. And then I hope that you also got some very practical points on what's coming down the pike with the writing program. I'm really, really enjoying your students. I'm having a great time getting to know them, and I hope that you are making the most of your at-home days, enjoying each other and outdoors, and we're so grateful to be able to share this homeschool year together. Okay.